So here we are in the prayer area that I'm establishing in the Royal Mayab backyard. I found the ceiba tree here a couple of weeks ago, and as I was driving by thinking, where is the best place for me to connect to the energy of the ninth wave? Well, I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to be right by a ceiba tree? And as I was driving along, it just happened to be, this is on my way. So, they have a temescal over there. We don't have time for a temescal here. We likely will have one later today. So, the importance of Po, does it take precedence over the understanding of the ninth wave? I say discard Po. Got to assume everyone's going to learn Po on their own. But the ninth wave, you have to experience it yourself. Po, you have to experience yourself. Po teaches you some of the techniques of experiencing yourself. And how do you best experience yourself? Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Dealing with economics, ethics, energy, health, and the other dimensions on the co-creation wheel. But let's just use those as a beginning point, not to discount the other 8, economics, ethics, energy, and health. Covers all of the other ones pretty well somewhere in their DNA. So while the wheel at first looks a little complicated because firstly Barbara used the wrong color scheme, a different color scheme, not the wrong one, it's a different color scheme. It just has no relationship to our humanness. The color scheme we have added to it gives this new dimension to the co-creation wheel. But we're not going to go into the colors of the wheel right at the moment. What we want to do is to express our gratitude for being able to be clear enough to contemplate the ninth wave. What does it mean? What does it mean? How does one explain the 100th monkey phenomena? How does one explain that? Some take the story and they twist the story, and the story is this and the story is that. Some support it, some say it's not real. But the point is, the 100th monkey notion is about global consciousness. That's what it was about. We didn't use the term. I never ever heard Mr. Keys use the term global consciousness. That's only because I didn't listen to him enough. If you read his books, he had a different term he just called it consciousness, or he called it higher consciousness in his book, Handbook to Higher Consciousness. So there is a way to connect to the ninth wave using Key's work. Use his handbook. Why write a new handbook when you already have a master's handbook? We don't need to write a new one. But most of our other teachers are writing and publishing because they were brought up in a society of publish or perish. Maybe things would be a little different if I published more. Why accounting isn't boring. I didn't publish it enough. We only sold 1,000 copies out of one store. We should have done better with that. But that's another issue. But maybe that's a when we look at global mindedness, we look at what is that? What is that in between the two ceiba tree? The heart of Africa. How long have I been carrying the heart of Africa? Why do I carry that? What is contained within it that I think is so special? Well, I remember why I started to cover it over. Maybe it has something to do with that. The reason I covered it over, because I noticed inside, there were 3 worlds inside that. And they were all informed in bubbles. And what I noticed, when they were in the light, the bubbles moved. Now you can say, well, you can't see bubbles in amber move. Well, if you look close enough, over time, or you use a global mind, you can see the bubbles move. Maybe it's a trick on your eyes, but the bubbles clearly do move. They're moving a little less now because they're covered and protected. So global mindedness enables us to imagine you had full capacity of your own intellect, to expand your mind to being present in a with global consciousness. Be present with global consciousness. Now I've sort of set the scene here, so maybe it will be easier for me than others because I'm in the scene. Not to be obscene, but to be in the scene. Which reminds me of a story I was going to tell. Is this the appropriate time? Probably not. So I won't. The idea, though, was just about jokes. Making people laugh. I told an old joke yesterday, and I've been thinking since then of different jokes, and you know, a lot of them don't flow into my mind. I mean, I can create jokes all the time. I think I seem to have been able to do that. And I was remembering the best joke I ever learned was from my Uncle Bill. At least I've told the story so many times I don't know if I'm making it up or it was really a story from my Uncle Bill, but I always like to give him credit for it. Brings him into my memory. And therefore it brings my father into my memory. So here we are at just after 12 on the 8th day of December, when the Tzolk'in, the 9th wave, is right optimally. We are in the groove of the energy of the 9th wave at this moment in time. So, big deal. What does it mean? What does it mean to be in the 9th wave? Well, firstly, you can hear the birds. You can almost hear the wings of the butterfly over there, if you listen carefully. But it's overshadowed by other sounds. So we're not going to play head games with ourselves. We're just going to go into the notion of global consciousness. Let's not play games. Let's not play with our senses. Let's use our highest sense, our God self. That's our highest sense. So the sun is right up there. Well, that's where we're connected to. And that's, I think, all you need to know. When you're in the 9th wave, you feel a connection with the sun. Because the sun hits at everybody exactly the same. Unless we mess up the atmosphere. If we put stuff in the air, It's going to disturb the way it comes through. We know if we lose too much of the ozone, we're going to fry ourselves. We know that. You don't hear much talk about the ozone layer in the last little while. Certainly the idiots running the United States of America. Now there is a thing where we should bring prayer to global mindedness. How can a global mind help Mr. Trump? How can we get the notion of being global minded into that man's thick skull? Well, we first have to deal with the drugs that he's taking. We don't know what they are, but we see the symptoms of serious drug use. Not that I'm an expert in cocaine, but probably very close to cocaine or a derivative of it. The only other behaviors that I seem to connect to, and I haven't done those things myself, but there's sort of the drug they give horses to wake them up. You know, like a chunga. I don't know what it is, but it seems to work on horses, and it seems to do something to Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump is really in bad shape. So, how do we get people? Imagine you're someone in another country, and I'm going to select Ghana only because my friend Serena has been doing some programs in Ghana, and I've been invited there next year with her. So I bring up Ghana for what do those people think about a Mr. Trump? What? Do they find him funny? Do they even know who he is? They must learn what the United States is. I mean, here's a country of less than 5% of the world's population, less than 5%, maybe 5%, using between 30 and 40% of the world's resources, and using a distribution system that enables about 2 billion people to be pretty close to a starving level on the planet. So what man what human, what mind would ignore those 2 billion people for the sake of the 5%? The rest of the world just has to stand up. The rest of the world, and the way we can do it is through the United Nations resident coordinator in every one of those countries. Every needy country has a UN resident coordinator. The only problem is that the coordinator is not trained properly, dysfunctional at best. Not, I don't know any of them. But they're not allowed to do anything. They're not allowed to do anything. The UN resident coordinator in Mexico, for example, we've contacted 3 people that understand the term United Nations resident coordinator in Mexico, and suggested that we ought to look at developing the position differently in Mexico. And each of these people, they're just doing their job. They've got a job description, and they're doing the best they can with their job description. And it's probably ill-described because, and this is what we pointed out at the UN panel. The UN panel on the UN resident coordinator. So we pointed this out to the UN panel that's investigating it. We said the resident coordinator needs to be trained differently. They need to be working with the UN resident coordinators in the have countries. But the have countries don't even have a coordinator. So you got no one to coordinate with. So this is my global mindedness thought today at this moment. We can solve the world problem just by developing the UN resident coordinator and giving them and we need no one's permission to do this too. We just need to do it. Those in the position that are already getting paid to do the job and don't know the job, well, they got a dilemma because they got to figure out how to get paid the way they have been getting paid to not do the job. They're already getting paid to not do the job. Go figure that one out. And that's our enemy. And the system of the United Nations is so broken. People do not know how broken it is. And is this something we do when we're talking global mindedness? Yes, because why? Because in the wheel is the notion of governance. Global governance. How are we going to have global governance? Well, the global governance is about the individual. It's the self, the individual self. And it's about each one of us taking responsibility for the whole thing. I remember back when in Toronto 2000, we did a workshop on the notion of responsibility. How do we fulfill our responsibilities? How do we fulfill our responsibilities? What are they? It was interesting. You see a room of 100 people and how some of them struggled to think of what they were responsible for. They had to struggle for that. So we are responsible for the ceiba tree. We're responsible for this circle. We call all the great spirits are in our circle. They're all here in Mexico. They're sitting here. The energies that sit around the ceiba tree. And they are going to empower the grandmothers. I should mention this morning. I woke up this morning at 5 o'clock and 4:30, and I had to get by 5 o'clock to the church where my friend was having a special ceremony. My friend Javier was having his 50th birthday, and they were doing a special ceremony at the church. He invited me to come and attend. 4:30 in the morning, good, I should say. Well, I was there. And 2 hours later, hearing, I guess what you call that. It was a Christian service, culminating at the end in a drinking of the blood of Christ and having the wafer, which I didn't do either of those. I observed the congregation participating in that ceremony. And in that time, I was, wondering the connection that we all have to Jesus Christ. What is this thing? How are we connected to this prophet, Jewish prophet from 2,000 years ago? They hung him up to dry. But he's still living at 1.5 billion in Christ's light. You cannot stop the light of Christ. You cannot stop the light of Christ. You have to be careful not to get burned by it and not to be distracted from the truth, because it was a good story. Back then, the rabbis were not allowed to learn certain information until they were 40. And Jesus said, not in my time. Not in my time. And so he began to teach about connectedness to light. And the Old Testament sort of was a guidebook for him. But then some of his boys wanted to rewrite it, and they did. And they made good stories. And there's all these different disciplines. And go figure how they allow the President of the United States to behave the way he does. What's wrong with those people? What's wrong with those people? They allowed him to utter the words, move the capital of Israel. You can't move the capital of Israel unless the world wants it. If the world wants it, Global Mind will move the capital to Jerusalem. But not before they take it out of the peace equation. The idea we expressed and discussed 17 years ago when we were at the foundation, the inaugurating meeting of the Foundation for a Culture of Peace. The idea was expressed at the inaugural meeting of the Foundation for a Culture of Peace. And what have they done with it? I charge those people that attended the meeting of the Foundation for a Culture of Peace, I charge those people to take the message that was brought there by Wally Selenka, endorsed by myself and Federico Mayor, basically to take Jerusalem out of the equation. Make it a territory somewhat similar to the Vatican and put it under a triumvirate administration. But move? No. Nay. So us people with global minds need to think about how do we get Jerusalem taken out of the equation. Logic is dead. We've enunciated that. Logic is dead. There's no logical way to do it. There's no logical way to do it. So we have to use the spiritual way. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. We need to teach that to Mr. Trump. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Capture that on the 9th level. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. You might think you know what that means, but not until you say it in the right way. My friend the rabbi, the barefoot rabbi, one of 35 rabbis, I asked the question, what does Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad? And he says, Mitchell, every guy you ask will give you a different answer. The Christian might say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This rabbi might say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. And this rabbi might say, all my children, hear, O Israel. Listen, all my children. Listen. Shema Yisrael. Listen, all my children. Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Echad. You will only know its full meaning. This is what the rabbi said to me. You will only know its meaning when you say it the right way, when your body vibrates with the sound in the right way. Well, when experiencing global mindedness under the Sieba tree, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, you cannot say it a wrong way, Because every way carries right up to the sun. Every way carries it right to the sun. And it means we are all one. We are all one. One consciousness. Lots of different interpretations, lots of different aberrations, all based upon emotional, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual teachings that you've taken into your being. Bring them all into some form of balance. The physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. Bring them into balance. It's in this balance you will find yourself. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So the ninth wave is, by connecting to the ninth wave, is another way of connecting to the energy of Amma, the woman who goes around the world hugging people. It's the energy of Gaia. It's the energy all around the earth that is affected by magnetic pull, spin, turns, everything that has an effect on us. And right now, as the sun beats down on us in unheard of ways, creating fires. Send healing energy to the people in California that are experiencing the terror of absent-mindedness expressed through our natural environment. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So we're into the notion of our cosmic awareness. There is nothing that we cannot do. There's nothing we cannot achieve. We just need to put our mind to it. And we need balance in the United States. We need better balance there. They're out of whack, and the rest of the world needs to tell them so. And we can tell them so through the position of the United Nations Resident Coordinator. Be aware. The United Nations associations in Canada and throughout the United States, the ones in the United States are under the control of Mr. Turner, Mr. Ted Turner. But the United Nations Association is not a trustworthy organization to rely upon. The one in Canada is a perfect example. They have no idea what a UN resident coordinator might do, and all they do is present obstacles to him. And that's a good thing, actually. She wrote a letter to the head office in the United Nations. Hey, this guy cannot be a resident coordinator. And I said, hey, bring it on, bring it on. That was an idea the other day we had. How do we get me fired from being the interim UN resident coordinator, and let's get one appointed? In Canada, in the United States, and let's use all the ones that are already in place. They already know most of the gig. All they need to know is a few of the add-ons. As my friend David Saunders once said, the UN resident coordinator is the most sought-after position at the United Nations. And the schools in Canada don't even know the position exists. Go figure that one out if you can. Go figure that one out if you can. Mr. Trudeau, why is it we're not teaching about the UN resident coordinator if it's the most sought-after position at the United Nations? Mr. Trudeau, why aren't you paying more attention to the UN resident coordinator, Mr. Trudeau? Why aren't you standing up to Mr. Trump and telling him he can't just unilaterally move the capital of Israel? Stand up in this spiritual war. Stand up. I think I have to slow down now. I don't want this to be too long. I'm already hitting over a minute, an hour and a half. Is that an hour and a half? Wow. We're already into a different... We've moved. We've moved. An hour and a half, we've moved. Can you feel it? We've moved. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Learn Poe. Teach about the United Nations Resident Coordinator wherever you are, whatever country. Bring it forward. All my relations, I'm in. This is my good day.